Seeing the filaments inside the qi in his body, Baichuran originally thought were impurities that had invaded his purple palace. After all, the power of time manipulated by heaven at this moment was indiscriminately oppressing his entire existence from inside and outside his body. But after a slight scan with his soul awareness, Baichuran realized that those golden filaments were nothing else but the true qi, which was slowly condensed and born under the majestic pressure of the time wave urged by heaven. Even under this pressure, Baichuran's true qi was born as slowly as squeezing toothpaste, but after all, the true qi has existed in his body. Baichuran couldn't help but give up the resistance, spreading his hands and feet, letting heaven control a wave of time that surpassed another round and smashed it on him. The pressure from the giant wave became stronger and stronger, and blood started to appear on Baichuran's skin. But under the effect of the Creator's body-forging technique, these insignificant wounds healed in an instant. Moreover, after it healed, the Creator's body-forging technique worked on its own, making his body tougher. After a few rounds of huge waves, this pressure could no longer cause him any harm. And with the increase in the number of true qi filaments in the body, Baichuran's breath also rose rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, after a few more rounds of attacks, for some reason heaven suddenly retreated. The translucent twisted object quickly disappeared, and the surrounding scenes gathered again like dust and sand, covering Baichuran and Wise Immortal. "Why did you leave?" Baichuran curled his lips in disappointment, and then lifted a filament of true qi in his body, liberating Wise Immortal from the state of being imprisoned by time. The difference between this filament of true qi and his qi was the same as the difference between the true qi and qi in the body of ordinary cultivators. It was a qualitative difference. Baichuran just transported the true qi to the palm of his hand and touched the Wise Immortal lightly, yet the turbulence of time and space that bound him was easily shattered. What happened? Wise Immortal's thinking remained at the moment when heaven appeared. After being lifted from the imprisonment, he first froze for a moment and then quickly reacted. "Old Bai, did you run away from heaven?" "I didn't bully it. It fucked me for a long time and ran away by itself." Baichuran sighed. "Okay." Wise Immortal doubted. "Why are you so disappointed? You really hope it will stay with you." Baichuran then briefly explained the situation to Wise Immortal. After hearing this, Wise Immortal was shocked and said, "What? Heaven jealousy actually uses this method to practice true qi. However, if you think about it carefully, it seems that heaven jealousy's purple palace has no limits. You can only go to the outside world to seek pressure. It is a pity that you have practiced too much. If you have less than 10,000 or 20,000 layers, maybe you can use space pressure to help you build a foundation. But now, space attacks have no effect on you, right?" "I hate it." Baichuran regretted deeply. "It's useless to say this now. Let's think about how to get back first." Wise Immortal looked around. "Which era are we now?" "God knows." Baichuran looked around and found that a group of immortals were at war with a huge monster next to him. Anyway, it must have been a long, long time. "I don't know what era the Eastern Emperor Bel will send us to." Wise Immortal thought for a while then sighed. "But fortunately, you already have true qi in your body. This is hope. With your energy, even a filament of true qi can be comparable to all the true qi of a powerful cultivator. If you can understand clues about the rules of time in the rune structure of the gods we recorded, we may have the hope of returning to the original era." "Okay." Thinking of this fact, Baichuran's originally happy mood for having true qi calmed down. The surrounding scenes changed rapidly, showing the vicissitudes of time as the two of them showed the vicissitudes of time. After some time, the speed of scene change finally slowed down. A repulsive force came, and the two were pushed out of the long river of time and landed on a lush forest hill. "It seems that the power of the Eastern Emperor Bel is finally exhausted," Wise Immortal said. "It's really unlucky we don't know where we were thrown." Baichuran took a deep breath and then said in surprise, "The spiritual energy here is so rich. It is at least 10 times that of our time." Holding Wise Immortal's head, he found a tall boulder nearby and climbed it up, and then saw the magnificent scene ahead. They were in an extremely broad virgin forest, paved all the way to the end of the earth. In the forest they could see towering mountain peaks everywhere, like a divine sword straight through the sky. The substantive spiritual energy enveloped these peaks and forests, forming pieces of colorful and enchanting clouds. The clear water formed a silver waterfall like the Milky Way, which fell from heaven. 1. Baichuran even saw the substantive spiritual energy turned into a mountain spring to flow down from a certain mountain peak, forming a clear stream on the ground. The two were indulging in the beauty in front of them, and suddenly, countless birds in the forest flew up, screeching. A roar came from afar, and a giant tiger with wings on its back and hundreds of meters in length flapped its wings and hovered in the sky. The aura on this giant tiger was very powerful, almost equivalent to a cultivator in the physique integration stage. Even more shocking, it hovered in midair a few times and suddenly fell to the ground, crawling between the mountains. It turned out to be hiding something. The next moment, a white rainbow suddenly penetrated the sky, and the giant tiger wailed and fell to the ground sideways. A huge arrow appeared on its side abdomen, almost completely submerged in its body. The blood dyed its fur red, and the giant tiger was trying to escape, but the arrow seemed to penetrate its vital organs. After a few seconds, the giant tiger's head tilted. It died. Then the clouds in the sky suddenly broke, forming a big hole. A man with a length of about 1,000 feet appeared. His upper body was like a normal adult man, while his lower body resembled a giant dragon. The dragon tail swung as his huge body landed from the sky, making the whole land tremble faintly. He also held a huge bow that matched his figure in his hand, and a quiver was slung around his waist, which was filled with countless huge arrows. Yeah. Chiron paused, then suddenly asked. Can you tell which period we are in? Let me see. Wise Immortal took a close look at the vast land in front of him, and then said. It should be at the end of the era of gods, the reign of the Eastern Emperor Tai. Fortunately, although it has fallen into the worst situation, it is at least the best case in the worst situation. You are so optimistic. Chiron pondered for a moment and suddenly said. In other words, now the last heavenly emperor, Eastern Emperor Tai, is still alive and ruling the world, right? Wise Immortal took a look and replied. Well, the last heavenly emperor seems to be still there. That means the human race has not yet begun to rebel. Chiron clenched his fists and said. The first heaven jealousy has not appeared yet, so now I have come to this era, can I look for the first heaven jealousy? Then let him teach me how to build a foundation? It makes sense. Wise Immortal was taken aback for a moment, and then said. Indeed, this is the best method when I haven't been able to find the information of the first heaven jealousy. I also want to see who the first heaven jealousy is. Okay, then the next step is decided. Chiron raised his finger to the sky. First, set a small goal to find the first heaven jealousy. Your goal is good, but... Wise Immortal hesitated for a while and said. I think now, should you find a way to put on your clothes? Although the human race of this era is savage, they are still not unclothed. Chiron didn't expect that in the process of exploring the land of the gods, he would end up being naked. Generally speaking, his own clothes would also maintain infuriating defenses, but now it seemed that clothes made of ordinary fabrics were still inferior to his body. Even with the strengthening of his energy, the clothes cannot withstand the void storm's devastation. Anyway, those clothes were just bought casually at a certain clothing store under the mountain. The loss was not much, but the problem was, because of self-confidence, Chiron did not bring spare clothes in his storage bag. He originally wanted to bring it because he couldn't use the cleaning spell, but Li Jinyao volunteered to take on the job of cleaning his clothes. So now Chiron was in a very embarrassing situation. He had to run into the forest under the guidance of Wise Immortal and killed two strange creatures that looked like leopards and bears with bare hands like a savage. Their fur was peeled off and a pair of lederhosen was made hastily, barely covering his private places. It would be great if Su Xiangxue was here. With the handcraftability of the Kamasutra sect master, sewing a robe with this kind of fur would be a piece of cake. Miss Li is also fine, she probably doesn't mind sewing a dress for her old predecessor. Ruowei, this child is born in a royal family, and does this kind of delicate work? It took less than an hour after coming to the era of gods, and Chiron began to think about mundane things in his mind. It's so funny that you are like this now. If I still have hands and feet, I have to find a photo stone to record your appearance. Wise Immortal was reworn by Chiron and hung on the back waist with animal tendons. It swayed and he teased, I think you were ingenious when you were refining tools, how come you become rough when it comes to doing this kind of manual work? I haven't practiced specifically, besides people are not sages, and I always have things that I'm not good at. Chiron sighed. You'll take me to find two strange animals with materials that can be used to refine tools later, and let me refine a piece of clothing again. The two were walking in the forest because in this era no one knew the way, so Chiron simply threw a wooden stick and chose a random direction. After walking for a while, Baichuran suddenly smelled a strange fragrance. This is... Baichuran sniffed and said in surprise. Wine. Having wine meant that there were inhabitants. In this era, although the brewers were not necessarily humans, at least they were also races with advanced intelligence. Through communication with them, Baichuran and Wise Immortal could obtain some basic information. Although Wise Immortal's great wisdom was very useful, it was not omnipotent after all. Some basic knowledge still needed to be obtained through communication. Even if the opponent was a race hostile to the human race, Baichuran was not afraid. After all, any dissatisfaction could be crushed by his fist. Following this scent, Baichuran quickly walked through the forest, throwing a few exotic animals that saw him as a prey far behind, and then he came to a cliff on the edge of the protruding cliff. There was a wonderful tree which had no flower and leaves. Instead, there were some bagged objects like pitcher plants. The aroma was emitted from it. What? It's a tree. Baichuran sighed with disappointment. What tree? Let me see. Wise Immortal shook his head urgently and shouted. Baichuran took him down and faced the tree. Wise Immortal looked at it for 2 minutes and said, "Oh, the name of this tree is called the Cheongji tree. The tree's sacs will absorb spiritual energy and produce energy-rich fairy wine. Whether the taste or color, it is the best fruit wine. After drinking it, mortals can still prolong their vitality and longevity. There are also large-scale plantings of it in the Heavenly Emperor's garden. It's not a wine made by humans. No matter how delicious it is, it's useless to me. I'm not Huangfu Feng." Baichuran sighed. "At least you can drink the wine that the gods on behalf of the gods drink to quench your thirst," Wise Immortal said. Baichuran thought about it, so he came to the edge of the golden pulp tree and opened a pouch hanging on it. A strong scent came in, and inside the capsular bag, the crystal-clear agar syrup swayed slightly with Baichuran's movements. Just smelling the scent made people couldn't help but talk. Seeing the wine, Baichuran's original unhappy mood was also relieved a little. He stretched his head and drank the wine in his pouch. A delicacy that had never been tasted, poured into his mouth, stimulating every cell on his tongue. The sweet wine was full of fragrance, but it did not burn the throat. On the contrary, when the wine was flowing down the throat, it brought a cooling sensation, making people feel a little warm. Baichuran raised his head, smacked his tongue, and couldn't help saying, "Good wine." He climbed to the tree and drank all the wine on the fruit tree very simply. After doing this, the two continued on the road and walked in the same direction for about an hour. When the two walked to a turbulent river, Baichuran suddenly covered his stomach and shouted, "Wait, there is a situation." What happened? Hearing Baichuran's voice, Wise Immortal was also a little nervous. Could it be that you have a stomachache? It's not. Baichuran looked strange. I actually want to pee. What? Weird. Wise Immortal said in surprise. After stepping on the road of cultivation, the digestive ability of the cultivator was greatly increased. Even if the cultivator ate the food that ordinary mortals eat, they could basically digest the food completely, and did not need to excrete the indigestible food scraps. For Baichuran's physical strength, let alone a mortal's food, even the jade syrup that an immortal drank was no different from drinking plain water. But now he actually needed urinary. I remember the last time I wanted to pee, it was still time to practice a poison exercise. Baichuran muttered. At that time I was eating highly toxic substances every day, and the toxins that the body could not digest were all excreted from my body in that way. I can only say that the things of ear of gods are really extraordinary. Wise Immortal suggested. It happens that there is a river nearby. You should solve it first before you go on the road. Well, it makes sense. Baichuran walked through the bushes and walked to this big river, but seeing the waves of the big river rolling and the white waves surging, stimulated his urge of urination even more. So he unbuttoned his leather pants and began to untie them. After a while, Baichuran put on his pants and let out a long sigh of relief. I have not experienced this kind of nostalgic feeling for nearly 2,000 years. That's a good feeling? Wise Immortal asked in doubt. Of course it's a good feeling. While talking, Baichuran grabbed Wise Immortal's head from his belt and held it in his hand. At this time, from the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of a strange thing appearing in the river, which looked like a giant tail. What is that? After a while, as the waves surging, the thing gradually rose to the surface. It turned out to be an ink-colored dragon, but at this moment it was lying on the river with its stomach turned, drifting with the waves, and was gradually rushed to the lower reaches of the river by the waves. That's a pure-blooded dragon. Wise immortal Tut said. The era of gods is incredible. In the land of the mortal world, you can actually see this pure-blooded dragon. Its blood is even purer than the little girl who has a good relationship with you. But what's wrong with it? How did it die? How could I know? Chiron shrugged. It must have nothing to do with me anyway. The two watched the giant dragon slowly being washed away by the current. Chiron thought for a while, and simply walked along the river in the downstream direction. Chiron walked very slowly. In a blink of an eye, even the dragon corpse had disappeared in the river. He didn't know where it was washed away and he didn't care. He continued to walk slowly downstream, killing a few water beasts who wanted to eat him. At the dusk, he came to a three-way intersection in the river, and suddenly his ears caught a roar that was different from the roar of the beast. Damn it! Who would dare to kill my dragon? It's a human voice. Chiron lifted his spirits, speeded up his pace, and hurried to the place where the sound came from. Pushing aside the bushes on the bank of the river, he saw the existence making this sound. It was a tall god, wearing bronze armor, holding a sharp sword in one hand, and holding a small pagoda in the other. His body looked like a human, but with a blue face and fangs, two huge anti-teeth sticking out from under his lips, pressed against the corners of his mouth. The height of this deity should have been changed and shrunk a lot, but even so, his height was about 20 to 30 meters, so when standing on the beach he was still a giant. At his feet lied the dragon corpse that Chiron and Wise Immortal saw in the river not long ago. The tens of meters long black body was fished out from the river by this god and spread a piece on the river beach. In front of him, there were several humans with disheveled heads, dressed in animal skins, and wooden bows and arrows slung on their backs, kneeling on the ground in front of him, shivering. It's human race. Wise Immortal whispered. After Chiron hid him in the bushes, he planned to observe the situation in secret. Humph, being able to poison this river, poisoning my dragon? Think about it carefully, the only living beings around here who can do this are you humble human. The god was pacing back and forth in front of the group of human races, and the heavy footsteps shook the river beach. Even if you didn't have the guts to poison the dragon of the god, but after all, it is true that you poisoned the dragon of this god. What do you think this god should do? The human race did not dare to say anything and was silent for a long time. The leading human finally lowered its head and said in a low voice, "Dear the great god, as their leader, I'm willing to pay for his life." Roll. The god roared and stomped heavily on the ground, crushing the ground under his feet. What are you? Can you compare with the dragon of the god? Pay for his life? Is your little life worth the dragon of this god? The other humans buried their heads lower and dared not look up, and the human leader hurriedly said, "The great god, please calm down your anger. What kind of compensation does great god want? As a clan, we will definitely try our best to accomplish it." Originally, according to the truth, this god should take the heads of your clan to pay for the life of this god's little dragon. The god turned his sword in his hand and walked back and forth. But it is expected that your clan, who sincerely worships the gods, has always been favored by His Majesty the Emperor and other gods, so this god is also a large number of adults. This time I will let you go. Counting time, your clan's newborns in here should also be born. You wait and go back, choose a few pink and tender children for this god as a gift. For this matter, this god will forgive you. As soon as he said this, Chiron could see that the leader's body trembled very clearly, but in the end he lowered his head and responded in a low voice. Thank God for his great grace. Just follow God's will. Well, remember, the deadline is 7 days from now. The god nodded in satisfaction. Also, I don't like babies born more than 1 month old, so let's forget those born more than 1 month old. Yes. Seeing this, Chiron felt that he could no longer sit back and watch. This group of gods obviously did not regard the human race as human beings, but as a kind of animal that was raised in captivity and could communicate with themselves. He twisted his wrist and was about to send this god to hell, but when he just mentioned the true energy in his body, the space in all directions suddenly became gray, and everything in the world stopped flowing. The familiar oppressing force appeared again. But this time the pressure was just right, it just happened to stop Chiron's next move, and the time over there did not stop flowing. It seems that heaven only temporarily isolated him from the world this time. This is the interference of heaven. Wise Immortal muttered. It seems that it doesn't want us to change certain established history. Chiron moved his lips and was about to speak. A cold voice suddenly came out from the bushes behind the riverbank on the other side of the normal world. Hold on, you stop for me. Hearing this voice, the expression of the celestial god changed, and the clouds that had risen under his feet slowly dissipated. There was a rustle in the bushes, and then, from the bushes behind the river beach, a little girl slowly walked out. Like these humans, she was dressed very crudely. She seemed to be wearing a coat sewn with some kind of white fur, and her lower body was wearing a long skirt made of the same fur. But unlike the humans, this little girl who looked only 13 or 14 years old was born very beautifully. She had long black hair like a cloud, which was turned into a bun with a hairpin made of wood. Under the eyelashes there was a pair of bright eyes, small lips, without any makeup, showing a faint pink color. Her teeth were white, and there were faint purple tattoos on the corners of her eyes. Her skin was fair, like white porcelain with a faint luster. Looking at her jade finger arms, thin waist and fair skin, even wise immortal and Chiron couldn't help but admire her beauty. But the pretty little girl looked cold at the moment, and on her shoulder, there was a big black snake clinging to her shoulders, hissing her tongue. Seeing this little girl coming out, the celestial god also changed his expression and asked quickly, "The goddess of plague, why are you here?" The little girl didn't answer his question right away. She just walked to the river beach, glanced at the humans lying on the ground, glanced at the dragon corpse lying on the river beach, and then coldly said, "I poisoned this dragon, it has nothing to do with them." What? Seeing the offering was about to escape his hands, the celestial god couldn't help but exclaim, "You mean you poisoned my dragon for no reason? Even if you are the righteous god in charge of the plague poison, His Majesty will not indulge you. The goddess of plague, I advise you to think about it and let this group of humans hold the responsibility for you. I don't have to hold it accountable. Does this girl need human race to hold my responsibility?" The little girl snorted coldly and then said, "I am here to test a new poison pill by His Majesty's order. If you want to cause trouble to His Majesty the Emperor, you can do it. Anyway, your dragon is stupid enough to play in the river where this girl is testing poison. You neglect your own pet and still want to blame me when it dies? Your dragon broke into the test field of His Majesty the Emperor. I haven't asked you about your guilt, but you want to blame me first? A little god, dare to be rampant in front of this girl?" This. The deity took a step back with a little fear on his face. "Go away." The little girl glanced sideways at him, and the viper on her shoulder stood high, hissing her tongue. "This girl knows that the celestial gods are very unpleasant to me, but His Majesty is not going to embarrass me, a righteous god, for a little god's word like yours. If you don't get out of the way, this girl will use you to test medicine for His Majesty. The goddess of plague, I have written down this matter today." The celestial god was very unconvinced and arched his hand to a little girl who had just reached his ankle, and then angrily carried the dragon corpse on the ground. "Bah, it's really bad luck. Why did I meet a damned god?" He cursed angrily in a low voice, and his figure quickly rose to the level of nearly 1,000 feet, and then flew up into the sky, carrying the black dragon into the sky. The little girl obviously heard the abuse of this god, but she didn't care. Instead, she turned to look at the group of human races on the ground and said, "You guys get up." Yes. Several human races who seemed to be hunters got up from the ground, lowered their heads, and stood far away from the little girl. "Do you need me to send you back to the clan?" The little girl asked after hesitating for a moment. "Don't dare, don't dare." The leader of the human race shook his head hurriedly and said, "The great god doesn't need to be busy with our own affairs, we dare not delay." "Humph, then you go by yourself." The little girl turned around and said, "Starting now, before it gets dark, you should be able to return to your clan." "Yes." Several humans lowered their heads and the leader whispered, "Then these lowly ones will go." Then this group of human races ran into the dense forest as if avoiding some disaster and disappeared. The little girl didn't express any disrespect to these human races. She walked to the river and took out a small bottle from her jacket and poured it into the river water. Then she put away the bottle, asked coldly, "The one over there, have you seen enough?" At this time, Chiron suddenly realized that heaven's restriction on him had been unknowingly resolved. He was standing outside the bushes with such big thorns and did not hide it, so the little girl found out easily. Because the girl who was suspected of being a god seemed to have no hostility towards the human race, Chiron touched his nose and walked out of the bushes. "Miss?" He arched his hand at the little girl and asked, "Excuse me, this is the border of the humans' hunting area, and beyond it, there is an uninhabited wilderness." The little girl answered Bai Chiron's question very coldly, and then asked him, "Are you a newborn god?" "What?" Bai Chiron looked at her hands and feet and said in surprise, "I think I should be a human being. Stop pretending to me." The little girl waved her hand very impatiently. "How can a human body have such huge energy? If you are a human and alone in this wilderness, you have already become the food of other beasts." Bai Chiron was stunned. It seemed that the human race of this era was not as strong as he thought. "Okay." So he could only say, "Then what do you say I am? Where are you born from?" The little girl asked again. "Although you are a little confused and can't remember your race, you should know where you were born, right?" Bai Chiron said in his heart that, "I really don't know." From the time he remembered, he seemed to have been abandoned on a certain battlefield, relying on rummaging through the dead people's corpses to make a living. He thought for a long time but couldn't think of a good reason, so he could only say in a nonchalant manner, "I am an orphan." "Orphan?" The little girl thought for a while with a weird expression, but suddenly she thought of something. Her expression softened a lot. "I understand," she said to Bai Chiron. "Are you a second-generation god? Your parents were killed when you were born just like me." Am I a second-generation god?" Bai Chiron touched his head, pretending to be dumbfounded. "It seems that you still don't know the situation." The little girl sighed, turned around and said, "Come with me." She stepped forward. Bai Chiron rushed to her side in 3 and 2 steps, walked side by side with her and asked, "Miss, can I know your name?" "You can call me Jianglan." The little girl answered Bai Chiron's question and then asked, "How about you? Do you have a name?" "I do," Bai Chiron replied. "My name is Bai Chiron." Following Jianglan all the way, Bai Chiron and Wise Immortal came to a small house surrounded by woods. This simple hut built of stones and thatch was built on the mountain. Jianglan used her supernatural power to forcibly open up an open space in the lush woods and used it as her residence. There was a simple fence with bamboo sticks around the hut. 2 fields have been opened up in the yard. Some flowers and plants that Bai Chiron didn't know were planted here. There were rows of wooden shelves beside the hut. There were several earthy yellow clay pots placed on them, and the sound of crawling came out from the pots. "Don't touch the things in my yard, or I don't care about burying you after you die by poison." Seeing Bai Chiron looking curiously to observe a flower in the yard, Jianglan reminded. Bai Chiron straightened up, followed Jianglan, and walked into her cabin. The conditions in the hut were very rudimentary, much more primitive than the poorest farmhouse Bai Chiron has ever seen. A small table was piled up with wood and stones on the ground, and 2 wooden stakes were placed next to him. It was a bench, and in the corner next to the small table, a stone platform covered with animal skins was probably the bed used by the little girl in front of him. There were many bottles and cans in the corners of the room as well as containers made of beast skulls, but there was no peculiar smell inside the room. Instead, it was filled with a subtle smell, as if many medicinal materials are mixed with a certain sweet taste. "This is for you." Jianglan found a hammock made of animal skins from a wooden box on the wall of her house and handed it to Bai Chiron. "There are 2 trees outside. You can hang this one and sleep on the tree. After tomorrow, I will take you to the sky and let His Majesty the Emperor give you the godhood. Then you don't have to stay with me anymore." "Oh, thanks a lot." Bai Chiron took the animal skin she handed over. "There is miasma outside, even ordinary gods can't get in. If you sleep in the yard, you don't have to worry about the safety of your life." Jianglan exhorted 2 more words and then said, "Well, you go out to rest first, I want to go to bed too." Bai Chiron subconsciously wanted to say how early it was, but he looked up at the sky and remembered that he was in another era. The nights of this era were quite dangerous. Even in the settlements, the human may be attacked and lose their lives at any time, so the habit of this era must be to work at sunrise and rest at night falls. Although Jianglan was a god, judging from the fact that she lived on the earth and not in the sky, she should have been exiled by other gods. It is estimated that her work and rest habits were also affected by the human race's influences. After he came out of the hut, Jianglan immediately closed the door of the hut. Bai Chiron's sensitive ears heard the sound from inside. This little girl of the gods should have taken off her clothes and went to sleep just like she said. He took this animal skin hammock and walked around the hut, and found the 2 big trees growing together behind the hut. Several branches were suitable for binding the hammock. As long as there was a foothold, there was nothing Bai Chiron couldn't climb on. He climbed up the tree with the hammock, tied the two ends of the hammock on the branches of the two trees, and was about to lie down. The corners of his eyes suddenly dangled. In the back corner of the yard, a passage was specially set aside. Baichuran was very curious in his heart. Relying on his power, he was not afraid of any danger, so he jumped off the tree and touched it silently. Behind the passage was a path that was opened up. Seeing that there should be people walking along the path, Baichuran finally walked out of the forest and came to a cliff. Looking down, there was a little fire in a dark wilderness. What did you see? Feeling Baichuran's movements, Wise Immortal, who pretended to be dead for most of the day, shook his head and asked, "Let me take a look too." Baichuran raised Wise Immortal's head and let him see the flames in the wilderness. As a result, Wise Immortal said without thinking, "Isn't that the settlement of the human race?" "Correct," Baichuran said. "From the edge of the river, you can see that this girl Jianglan seems to have a good impression of human race. Oh, speaking of this, I forgot to tell you. Wise Immortal was only at this time to make up for it. That little girl is a hybrid of God and human." "Hybrid?" Baichuran said in surprise. "Is she a demigod?" "There is no such thing as demigod. She is a pure-blooded god, the kind who has perfectly inherited the godhood of the previous generation." Wise Immortal replied. "Miss Su is a half-demon. That's because the bloodline of the demon emperor has been passed down for so many generations, but it is still unable to completely offset the bloodline of our human race. But the bloodline of the gods is different. The bloodline level of the gods is too high compared to other races in this era. The children born from their union with other races either died directly or were pure-blooded gods. Then her attitude towards human race can also be explained." Baichuran nodded while holding his chin. "So, who are her parents?" "If you ask for their name, I can only say that great wisdom can't see it. Perhaps for heaven of this era, their names are not yet worth remembering." Wise Immortal replied. "I only know that her father is an ordinary human race, and her mother, who used to be the god in charge of medicine, seems to have been in charge of the sea in the later period." "So what about her?" Baichuran asked again. "She, as you heard, is in charge of the plague in medicine. Of course, she has inherited her mother's authority over the sea." Wise Immortal replied. "She is in charge of the sea but does not live in the sea. She is in charge of the plague but lives so close to the human race. I am afraid that those guys in the sky are thinking of ways to get rid of her all the time." "In other words, from our standpoint, can we trust her?" Baichuran asked finally. "Look at you anyway, she is considered to be a friendly god, and for now, there is no reason to harm you." Wise Immortal hesitated for a moment and then said, "By the way, I understand the reason why you wanted to pee after drinking the wine from the fruit juice." "What reason?" "In the wine of the golden pulp tree, there was actually a sac that was poisoned." Wise Immortal said. "Yes, as you guessed, it was the little girl who got there. You want to pee because your body actively excreted the indigestible highly toxic substances in your body. In other words, the dragon of that celestial god was actually poisoned to death by your urine." "Oh shit." Baichuran's face collapsed. "You said she won't harm me. She really didn't intend to hurt you. The medicine is put in a place that the human race can't reach. The target he wants to poison to death is likely passing animals or even gods. Who knew you would go there to drink?" Wise Immortal sighed. "I have faults too. I didn't see it clearly at the time, but anyway, your body is really tough and there is no danger, just as nothing has happened." The next day, Baichuran, who was lying in the hammock, was shaken awake at dawn. He opened his eyes and looked down sideways, and found that Jianglan was kicking his hammock with her feet. The tree was so thick that 3 people were needed to hug around it, yet it was shaken violently by a little girl's feet in straw sandals. "Get up." Seeing him sticking out his head, Jianglan said to him very coldly, "Come down to eat." "Oh." Baichuran stretched out, then leaped off the hammock, which was 4 or 5 meters above the ground, and landed on the ground. "This thing is for you. Put it on." Jianglan put a pair of straw sandals into Baichuran's hands and then walked into the cabin without saying a word. Baichuran took the straw sandals and froze for a moment, then smiled bitterly and stuffed his bare feet into the straw sandals. This pair of straw sandals were exactly the size of his soles. Although the materials were rough, the handwork is very delicate and comfortable to wear. It seemed that Jianglan was not as indifferent to everything as she showed, but was a very careful girl. Walking to the door of the hut, Baichuran smelled a scent of meat. He saw that Jianglan was putting a black clay pot on the low table in the hut, and then using a wooden spoon to scoop out the broth in the pot, poured it into 2 wooden bowls. After doing all this, she sat down on a small stool by the table and pointed to the opposite side of her. "Sit." She picked up the wooden bowl and said briefly, "Eat." Baichuran walked to the opposite side of her, picked up the wooden bowl, and saw that Jianglan had picked up her own bowl and started eating. There was no other tableware on the table, only 2 shaved wooden sticks, which should be chopsticks of this era. Baichuran picked up the bowl and took a sip. The seasoning in this soup was only coarse salt and some tasted like coriander plants, but the broth itself tastes very delicious. Anyhow, there were chopsticks. Baichuran comforted himself and then followed Jianglan's example, and had a rather rich breakfast. In this era, women do not have the kind of later generations in order to maintain the feminine image. Survival came first here. Therefore, Jianglan's eating style was very masculine, and it could even be described as bold and unrestrained. Even Baichuran had to gobble it up, barely catching up with her speed. Perhaps because she was a god, Jianglan had a big appetite. Baichuran only ate a bowl of broth in a clay pot, and the rest went into her belly. After done eating and drinking, Jianglan used some blades of grass to clean up the oil stains on the mouth, and then put the dishes and chopsticks into the clay pot, and brought them to the nearby river and brushed them clean. Baichuran stayed in the house. After Jianglan got everything done and returned with the washed kitchen utensils, Jianglan asked him the first question of the day. "Can you fly?" Baichuran immediately felt an unstoppable fury, but he also understood that this little girl was not malicious, so he patiently replied in a dull voice, "I do not know." In fact, as early as this era, on the way before meeting Jianglan, Baichuran, who now possessed true qi, tried to fly by flying sword, but the facts proved that even if he possessed the true qi, ordinary iron swords could not bear his power. Once the true qi entered the sword, let alone flying, even if Baichuran relaxes his fine control of power a little, the blade would directly decompose into some kind of basic particles. According to wise immortals' guess, even in the land immortal era, he could not find a sword capable of carrying Baichuran's true qi. After working hard for a long time, he finally had a small amount of true qi in the Purple Mansion, but Baichuran still couldn't fly freely, which was tantamount to another bad news for him. "Really? You can't?" Perhaps not being able to fly was not a rare thing for the gods, so Jianglan was not surprised by Baichuran's answer. She said, "Then I will take you up, but you have to be mentally prepared. I am unpopular in the sky. Don't blame me if you are involved." I won't blame you." Baichuran nodded. "Then get closer." Baichuran moved slightly in Jianglan's direction and stood about 1 meter away from her. Jianglan looked at him, suddenly stretched out her hand and yanked his arm abruptly, at the same time coldly said, "I told you to get closer. How can you learn the habit of heavenly God's mother-in-law before you go to heaven?" Baichuran was caught off guard and was stunned, leaning against Jianglan's side, and then a cloud of mist rose up under the little girl's feet, lifting the 2 of them up to the sky. Jianglan led him through the clouds, across the galaxy, and ascended to the top of the sky. At the confluence of the Milky Way, Baichuran saw a scene he was quite familiar with. Built on the shore of the Milky Way, a jade ladder leads directly to the heavenly palace. However, compared to the old sky that has collapsed after tens of thousands of years, this place was much more prosperous at this moment. Countless small boats came from all directions, and gods with various appearances standing on them. They all climbed up the sky along this jade ladder to pay homage to the supreme master of this era and enjoy the life that only the gods can enjoy. After coming here, Baichuran also intuitively felt how bad Jianglan's popularity was. These gods, who were originally full of peaceful smiles, changed their faces when they saw Jianglan, and they evaded one after another, gave way to Jianglan and Baichuran, and some even yelled while turning the bow of the ship directly, returning from the Milky Way to where they came from. Jianglan didn't care about this either. She took Baichuran up from the jade ladder to the former heaven gate. The appearance of the heavenly palace in its heyday was completely different from the ruins Baichuran had seen before. Behind the heaven gate, it was no longer a ruined wall but a towering peak. The peak was flattened to build a prosperous city. Inside, people could faintly see that there are countless gods living here. And on the square outside the heaven gate, a god whose body was as huge as a mountain with a human face and a tiger body, was lying here, guarding the heaven gate. According to what wise immortal said, this guy was Lu Wu, the god who once guarded heaven gate. Seeing Jianglan coming, the giant raised his head, muffled like thunder, and asked, "The goddess of plague, why are you here today? Your majesty did not declare you to see him." Lu Wu. Jianglan stepped forward, looked up at it, and then said, "I brought a new god to His Majesty." She stepped aside and let Lu Wu see Bai Qiran behind her. "Oh." After watching for a while, Lu Wu said in a dull voice, "It's true that our gods are infallible. Little guy, what supernatural power do you have?" Bai Qiran lowered his head to think for a moment, then clutched his biceps and said, I think I have a lot of strength. Is it a supernatural power?" Strength. Lu Wu's voice sounded disappointed. "In other words, there is no other supernatural power, right? Nothing, just follow me, let me see how strong you really are." Bai Qiran looked at Jianglan, and the little girl replied coldly, "Go." Lu Wu is not only in charge of the capital under the sky but also in charge of the 9 departments of the sky. He is responsible for granting positions for new gods on behalf of the Heavenly Emperor. For His Majesty, you should use the honorific title. Lu Wu got up from the ground with some helplessness. The tall body comparable to 99 tigers in the legend stepped on the ground, but silently. He turned around and walked up to a white jade staircase next to the sky. Bai Qiran glared at Jianglan, then he followed Lu Wu's footsteps to a platform somewhere higher in the sky. There was a hollow in the center of this platform with a huge black rock in it. Lu Wu came to the platform and pointed to the huge rock. "Go, try to lift that huge rock." Bai Qiran looked at it and then walked to the edge of the giant rock. He stretched out his hand to test it, and the giant rock shook without feeling how heavy. Considering that the gods are at least 900 feet from the body, this kind of giant rock may be just a dumbbell for exercising their fingers. Therefore, after Bai Qiran thought about it, he thought this should be done very easily. So he raised this huge rock with one hand. "Ah, you are quite strong." Lu Wu's voice became softer. "This huge rock has supernatural power attached to it, and its weight is comparable to some particularly towering mountains on the ground. An ordinary god can't lift it up. I didn't expect you to do so relaxedly." Bai Qiran was stunned for a moment and stood there holding a huge rock with one hand. He didn't know should he continue to hold it or not, feeling very embarrassed. However, Lu Wu ignored his feelings but directly said, "Since you can move the mountain so easily, then you can try again. How far can you throw this huge rock? Here there is the sky outside, just throw it away." Bai Qiran glanced at the shining galaxy outside, a little hesitant. "The stars outside are all gods, what if the rock hit them?" "Ha, the vastness of this galaxy is beyond your imagination. You look at these stars like small spots of light close at hand, but in fact they are thousands of miles away from you." Lu Wu laughed and said, "Today, if you can throw it to another star, let alone take all responsibility, I will inform His Majesty directly and give you the position of a divine general. Remember what you just said." Bai Qiran tossed the rock ball in his hand like a bowling ball. "I said it." Lu Wu nodded. Bai Qiran raised the rock ball and threw it out with a bang. He didn't use the energy in the Purple Palace, but simply used the muscle power of his body, but even so, the huge rock still blasted in the air as soon as it shot it. The shock wave visible to the naked eye spread. Even in the sky, you can see the huge white ring appearing above the sky, and in the center of the white ring, a white trajectory traverses the sky straightly, interspersed into the distant bright galaxy. Immediately afterward, accompanied by the toothy collision, various star gods' curses came from the galaxy. "Oh fuck, what is it? My waist. My belt was knocked through. Which one of the meteors is this? Is there no break? I must go to His Majesty to complain. Three-legged crow, be careful. It is coming towards you." Listening to the chaotic voice coming from the galaxy, Lu Wu took a step back, then looked at Bai Qiran with an overjoyed expression and said, Yes, you really did it. The gods speak for themselves, so I'll go back and tell His Majesty the Emperor about you." "Thank you, great god Lu Wu." Bai Qiran arched his hands to Lu Wu. He thought about it just now, and felt that in this age dominated by the gods, seeking godhood in the heavenly court would also be good for him to collect the intelligence of the first heaven jealousy. As for the hostile relationship between the gods and the human race, he never said that he wouldn't betray. Lu Wu praised Bai Qiran again. Before the words were finished, there was a large number of stars on the bright galaxy side, which suddenly deviated from the established trajectory, and flew towards this side. They gradually transformed in the process of flying. Become a lot of tall and different-looking gods, surrounded this high platform. Which fucking bastard threw the stone? While shouting and cursing, they looked down at the platform only to see Bai Qiran and Lu Wu standing on the platform. "Great god Lu Wu? The moment they saw Lu Wu, these star gods all flinched and then they asked, "What are you doing here? And this one is?" "I'll introduce to you, this is a newly born god." Lu Wu stretched out his paws to push Bai Qiran, and Bai Qiran also took a few steps forward, arching his hands to the surrounding gods. "Hello everyone, my name is Bai Qiran. His supernatural power is infinite strength." Lu Wu smiled and said, "The stone just now was thrown out when I asked him to try his power. I'm going to recommend him to be a divine general. You guys, is that okay?" A group of gods looked at each other, then all nodded and said, "Great goodness." Then, as if they had forgotten their unpleasantness, they praised Bai Qiran and Lu Wu. They praised Bai Qiran's supernatural power and boundless future. They also praised Lu Wu's vision, and he was good at discovering talented ones for His Majesty the Emperor. Lu Wu was very proficient in shirking with them for a long time, and after receiving a few more social meetings, finally, let these gods go away. Then he turned to ask Bai Qiran's name, and then said to Bai Qiran, "Let's go, I will write the memorial, it will take a few days to wait for His Majesty to approve it. During this time you will return to the ground first and wait patiently." "Sorry." Lu Wu asked Bai Qiran to go back first, while it stepped on the cloud and flew toward the higher-level heavenly palace, seemingly to deal with the follow-up affairs. Bai Qiran followed its words and first returned to the square in front of the capital. Looking around, Bai Qiran did not find Jiang Lan. Has she gone back already? Bai Qiran's mood was a little bit depressed. The little girl was not relatives with him, so sending him here and introducing him to Lu Wu should be considered an extremely benevolent thing, but damn, I still can't fly now. Bai Qiran sighed as he walked along the jade ladder towards the Milky Way below. Although he had passed through the pressure of heaven and had a little true qi, the quantity was too little for him to fly, and the quality was too high for a normal flying sword. He couldn't find a sword that could bear his true qi, so Bai Qiran's current shortcoming could not be made up. Can I just jump down? Standing on the edge of the Milky Way, Bai Qiran stretched out his feet to tiptoe. Will it fall to the ground? What are you doing? A cold voice suddenly rang behind him. I'm thinking about how to reduce the impact when landing, ha. Bai Qiran turned his head and saw Jiang Lan standing behind him and said in a daze. Did you not leave? I thought you went back by yourself. I'm leaving, what are you going to do? Don't you know how to fly? Jiang Lan asked coldly. What do you want? Can't you jump from here? The star energy in the galaxy, even the high-ranking gods can't bear it. Do you want to become a bloody mess? Bai Qiran coughed twice and didn't tell her that he had jumped in several times after tens of thousands of years from now on. Come on, I'll take you back. Jiang Lan pulled Bai Qiran's arm over, and then the clouds formed, bring them to fly out of the Milky Way, slowly landing towards the ground. The two fell into the courtyard of Jiang Lan's cabin, and then Jiang Lan asked, What did Lu Wu tell you? Bai Qiran repeated what Lu Wu said to him before he left, and then Jiang Lan nodded and said, He is right. Since you have such power, it is natural to be noticed by the Emperor. But there are still a few days before this godhood is approved. Where do you want to stay? I do not know either. Bai Qiran touched his head. His main goal at the moment was to find the legendary First Heaven Jealousy and ask this senior about the method of building a foundation, but he didn't know where to start because of the vastness of the world. The First Heaven Jealousy must be a human, but the group next to Jiang Lan's house was probably not the only human living on this land. So Bai Qiran was going to wait first. When the godhood came down, he made several great contributions to the heavenly court, and then tried to use the intelligence network of the heavenly gods to help him find the First Heaven Jealousy. This was the most efficient method for now. Then these days you can stay here. Although you are a god, your appearance is like a human. The alien beasts outside are not capable of distinguishing your race, and you don't need to stay outside and deal with the alien beasts. Jiang Lan said coldly. But don't expect me to support you in vain. Those who don't work can't eat. If you want to live here, you have to work for me. Okay. Bai Qiran nodded. Helping with some work was nothing for him. To stay here, at least there was a hammock, so he did not need to lie in the wilderness to sleep. Second, this place was close to the human settlements, and it was also convenient for him to observe the humans of this era and get in touch with them. Then you go find today's lunch and dinner. You don't know what kind of fruit you can eat, so let's hunt today. Jiang Lan walked into the hut, then took out a wooden bow and a quiver of animal skins sewn with a few arrows. Around here, most of the furry beasts are edible. The arrowhead has my venom on it. As long as it is shot, It can paralyze the prey. Don't get it on your own, it will be troublesome to detoxify. I'm too lazy to bring you back myself. Got it? Baichuran took the wooden bow and quiver, slung it on his body and nodded. Seeing Jianglan walk into the house and put a bamboo basket on his back, he curiously said, "Why are you going?" Jianglan looked up at him and replied coldly, "Go to work." Hunting was not difficult for Baichuran. He walked out of the yard side by side with Jianglan and parted ways on a small road halfway up the mountain. He scanned with his soul awareness, and found a few plump beasts that looked like goats nearby, and used Jianglan's arrows to paralyze them. By the way, Baichuran felt that the wooden bow given by Jianglan was too fragile, so he ran to the beasts and directly stabbed the arrow into their torso. He found some vines nearby and tied these beasts together, and then Baichuran began to fish. "Hey, wise immortal, what do you think the work of the gods is like?" Holding an unknown blade of grass in his mouth, Baichuran looked for a good-looking piece of grass everywhere, and lay on it and asked, "You have to look at their godhood. With different godhood, the content of work is naturally different." Wise immortal replied, "According to what Lu Wu said, it is estimated that the godhood given to you is to guard one side for the Emperor of Heaven. Anyway, it means that in peaceful days you had nothing to do but fishing all day, but when the war comes you must go to the battlefield. As for that girl Jianglan, she is a goddess of plague. I guess her work is to manage the plagues and toxins in the world. Then the reason she is close to the human race, in fact, to facilitate the release of the plague?" Baichuran asked. "How the hell do I know that? If you care so much, why don't you go and have a look yourself?" Wise immortal replied Baichuran and then stopped talking. However, his words reminded Baichuran that in the future, he would also go to the human race to find clues about the first heaven jealousy. He took a few wild beasts back to Jianglan's hut, tied them to a wooden stake in the yard with vines, and then walked directly onto the path behind Jianglan's yard, jumped off the cliff, and walking to the nearby human settlement. He belonged to the human race, so after using the extremely fast speed to get out of the few warriors guarded by spears at the door, Baichuran pretended to be one of them casually, wandering in the settlements where the human race lived. The human race of this era was very difficult to survive, so along the way all humans Baichuran has seen, except for the children who are not as high as his knees, were all working. Regardless of men, women, young or old, strong people go hunting and guarding. Those who are weaker go to the settlement to plant and gather. Some people hold nets and go to catch fish in the river next to them. In short, everyone is doing their own thing. Only Baichuran was an idler, wandering idly in the settlement in broad daylight. Moreover, the scale of this settlement was not that large, at most 1,000 people. Baichuran didn't know what kind of human settlements of this size are in this era, but in his era, this kind of settlement was not comparable to a large village in some wealthy countries. Everyone should have seen faces in this kind of small place. Fortunately, the people in the settlement were currently busy with their own affairs, so they didn't notice him, an idler whom no one has seen before. After some observations, Baichuran discovered that all humans in this era seemed to be cultivators in the qi refining stage. Because of their spiritual energy, they were born very strong. Only a few sick and weak ones did not cross the threshold of the qi refining stage. However, because the immortal ancestor has not yet appeared and taught the humans the method of cultivation, there is only the qi refining stage in this settlement. Even the strongest fighters are just the strength of the peak of the qi refining stage, and those outside at every turn. Compared with the alien beasts that are equivalent to the distraction and combination, human beings are indeed at the lower level of the food chain. However, walking in this kind of settlement where everyone was in the qi refining stage gave Baichuran a sense of belonging. Ah, this is a great unity society. He sighed and walked around the settlement, but he didn't find Jianglan's whereabouts here, so he left the settlement and walked forward along the river next to the settlement for a while. At this moment he suddenly saw an idler who was as innocent as himself. It was a young human, sitting next to a puddle where the river flows with a fishing net next to him, and it seemed that he should be a fisher. However, at this time he was in a state of fishing, looking at the water, motionless. Baichuran thought for a while and then walked towards him. "Hey, young man." Baichuran came behind the young man and asked him, "What are you doing here?" "What?" Hearing Baichuran's voice, the young man was taken aback. He jumped up from the rock, stepped on the water pool and then turned back into a defensive posture. "Who are you?" "Do not be nervous." Baichuran waved his hand gently. "I am a human." "So, you're also a human?" The young man breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Baichuran's appearance. He quickly climbed up from the pool with his hands and feet, and checked whether there was any strange creature on his feet. Then he asked Bai Qiran, I haven't seen your face. You are not from the settlement. Where do you come from? Bai Qiran didn't know where there was a human in this world, so he could only answer casually. I came from outside and now I live on a nearby mountain. Alas, don't talk about this. I think you should have come to fish. Why are you looking at the water pool in a daze? What are you thinking about? Ha ha ha. When Bai Qiran mentioned fishing, the young man was a little embarrassed. He touched the back of his head and replied, Actually, I was just thinking whether our human race can become stronger. Okay. Bai Qiran was taken aback for a moment, and then asked with interest. Interesting idea, can you tell me the details? Once, there was a god who must not be named who taught us human race how to use the energy in our body. This kind of thing is called qi. Now, the human race relies on this energy and the protection of the gods to reluctantly survive in this dangerous world. This young man stretched out his hand, and a faint white light appeared on his palm. It turned out to be a human race at the peak of the qi refining period. But after this energy has grown to a certain stage, it stopped developing completely. There is no room for it in our bodies. I was thinking, if we can make this energy stronger, then we can also become stronger. Maybe one day we can also rely on our own hands to hunt those terrifying monsters as high as a mountain in the wilderness. I think your idea is very good. Bai Qiran praised. Hey, I just thought about it. I don't have a clue as to how to do it. The young man smiled embarrassedly and then grabbed the fishing net next to him. I haven't caught any fish today. I have to hurry up. Brother, if possible, go home soon. Although there are gods around here, the beasts will still attack us at night. I'm not in a hurry. I'll help you catch the fish. Bai Qiran snatched the young man's fishing net and then said, Let's continue the topic you just mentioned. I know how to make the qi in the body stronger. While talking, he threw the fishing net into the pool and then pulled it casually. The net was full of plump white fish. The young man caught the fishes thrown by Bai Qiran, and then said in surprise, What? Brother, you actually know? Then can you? Of course I can. Bai Qiran smiled slightly and said, The way to become stronger is... He just wanted to pick a suitable one from countless strange foundation-building secrets in his mind, but at this moment, the sense of rejection once again came, and he was once again banished from the world by heaven. I don't think you can do that, wise immortal said. Heaven does not allow history to be changed. If you tell him directly, then the immortal emperor and the immortal ancestor won't appear. This repulsion came and went quickly, and after a few seconds Bai Qiran returned to the world. That bitch is hypocritical. He curled his mouth. Brother, why didn't you say anything suddenly? The young man on the opposite side looked forward to it, but suddenly saw Bai Qiran in a daze, and then began to curse. He thought for a while and asked carefully, Did I provoke you? I'm not scolding you. Bai Qiran patted him on the shoulder and said, Come on, look at that puddle. The young man was an honest person. Bai Qiran let him watch, so he stared at the water pool. Bai Qiran's other hand moved slightly, making the hand seal of freezing, condensing the water vapor in the air, and forming a hazy mist on the surface of the pool. Oh, it's foggy on the water, brother? The young man exclaimed. How is it? Does the mist on the water look like the qi in the human body? The young man nodded, and Bai Qiran continued. Look again, watch carefully. He increased the output of the hand seal of freezing, and the water vapor floating on the surface of the water pool suddenly condensed into water droplets and dripped into the water pool. The young man's eyes widened, and after a few seconds, he was suddenly overjoyed. Big brother, I understand. At this time, Bai Qiran, who was standing by, suddenly felt that the qi in this young man's body instantly condensed and turned into a thick true qi flowing in his limbs. Bai Qiran's face instantly became like someone who just swallowed a pound of shit. This young man turned out to be the spiritual immortal physique. Wise immortal exclaimed in a low voice. Unexpectedly, I was able to witness all three legendary physiques of cultivator, heavenly demon, spiritual immortal and heavenly jealousy. Old Bai, it was really a correct decision to follow you at the beginning. The speed of this boy's foundation building was very fast, and because of the special physique and the abundant aura of this era, his foundation building was quite perfect. After successfully building the foundation, the boy tried to transport the true qi in his body and expelled a palm toward a giant tree next to him. With a snapping sound, a hollow in the shape of a palm print appeared on the giant tree, and young people could even see the back of the giant tree through this hollow. Brother. No, I should call you a wise man. The young man shouted in surprise. I made it. Yes, you succeeded. Baichuran smiled very kindly. He patted the young man on the shoulder, but a dark thought emerged uncontrollably in his heart. His neck is very fragile, I just need a little bit of force and he will be gone. Shaking his head vigorously, Baichuran felt that maybe he had been with demonic cultivators like Su Xiangxue and Li Jinyao for a long time, and therefore having thoughts that only a demonic cultivator could have. Concentrated, he looked at the young man, and the young man also carried the fishing net full of big white fish and smiled at him. Wiseman, I'm going to tell every tribe in the settlement this hopeful news. Just do what you want. Baichuran waved his hand. Also, don't call me Wiseman, I'm not used to it. Then why should I call you this? Baichuran hesitated for a moment. If you don't dislike it, you can call me Master. Master. The young man immediately kneeled. Okay. Baichuran nodded and asked. Then you are now my registered disciple. Anyway, do you have a name? I don't have a name. I should have had it, but my parents died and the gods took my name away. The young man chuckled. What happened? Baichuran asked. Tell me the details. The young man told him about it, and Baichuran learned that the young man's parents were dead in the hands of the gods. As for the reason, it was also very simple. The gods protected the human race, but they also formulated detailed rules for the human race. Because of accidents, his parents failed to give the offering the gods wanted on time, so the gods took their lives. They also took away the young man's name. But everyone in the settlement treats me very well. The young man laughed. Although there is no name, I am the only person in the village who has no name. When someone says, hey, I can understand that it is calling me. Baichuran was silent for a while. Although the young man was very optimistic, Baichuran estimated that judging from the custom of worshipping the gods of this era, the human race in the settlement couldn't treat the son of the people who violated the rules well. It was just that in this era one more labor was an extra guarantee for survival, so the young man was accepted by the people in the settlement instead of being driven out of the settlement directly and letting him fend for himself. Although you're just my registered disciple, it can't be without a name. After thinking about it, Baichuran said, why don't I make one for you? Oh. A hesitant look appeared on the young man's face. Baichuran could see that he still wanted a name in his heart, but he said, however, no matter what name you choose, you must report it to the gods through the wizards in the settlement, and the gods must agree. It's okay, I'll make one for you first. Baichuran waved his hand. This name is for the time being when I call you. After a while, when I say it will be fine, you can tell the wizard and let him pass this name for you. Okay then. The young man also asked expectantly. Master, what kind of name are you going to give me? Well, I think about it. According to what he heard, because of the sparse population, most people's names in this era contained a single character, and there were no surnames to speak of. Baichuran's eyes flickered around, thinking about the name he was about to give to the young man. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas were not suitable. World seemed to be too stupid. While thinking about it, Baichuran's eyes dazzled the human settlements, and suddenly saw a group of humans being led by a wizard, offering a plump yak-like livestock as a sacrifice to the gods. They knelt on the ground and kept worshipping, muttering something in their mouths. Baichuran raised his eyebrows and suddenly turned his head and said to the young man, yes, you will call it Li from now on. Li? The young man asked with some surprise. Master, what does Li mean? Li means standing. Baichuran stretched out his hand and wrote a standing character on the ground. As for why I gave you this name, I will tell you when the time comes. Yes. The young man was overjoyed. I have a name. I will call you Li from now on. Baichuran smiled and said, let's go, I will send you back to the settlement first. Now the young man who should be called Li nodded, picked up the fishing net full of white fish, and walked towards the settlement with Baichuran. The guards at the gate of the settlement obviously knew Li, so even if they saw Baichuran who was following him with a face, they didn't stop him. The whole settlement was surrounded by a circle made of sharp logs to defend against wild beasts, and Li's home lived on the edge of the settlement closest to the wooden wall, which was one of the most dangerous places in the whole settlement. I have to keep my spear at hand at night. Li smiled as he walked. Otherwise, beasts may come in when you fall asleep, but because of a blessing in disguise, I can occasionally get more hunting gains than others. Then you have a pretty good time. Bai Qiran said casually. As he was walking, he suddenly saw a group of people on the side of the clearing. There was a wizard in the middle of the crowd, holding a crooked bone staff made of animal bones and wood, and chanting. What is that? Bai Qiran stopped and asked curiously. That? Li stopped and explained. That's the wizard in the settlement that did the ritual to drive the goddess of plague away. People in the settlement are sick, which means the goddess of plague is at work. If the goddess of plague is driven out in this way, the sickness of the people in the settlement will be healed. Isn't the goddess of plague also a god? Bai Qiran thought that when he had just met Jiang Lan, her unceremonious tone towards the celestial god, it was obvious that she was much stronger than that god. Dare you drive her away? Are you not afraid that she will come back to avenge you? I don't know this either. Li was a little ignorant. But the rules are all set by the gods. Maybe the goddess of plague can be driven away by us. Otherwise, there will be other gods to subdue her, right? Bai Qiran recalled for a moment that he followed Jiang Lan to the sky and saw the other gods avoided her. He said to his heart that this was nonsense. Let's go and take a look. Bai Qiran proposed. Okay, you can wait a while. Li walked to his hut and opened a large urn that was more than 1 meter high next to the house. The urn was filled with water. He poured all the white fish in the fishing net into the urn and skillfully hung the fishing net to dry. Then he said, Let's go, master, I will take you over and have a look. He chose a highland in the settlement, where they could clearly see the situation in the center of the crowd. Bai Qiran was brought here by him and looked towards the center of the crowd and saw a few sick people in the crowd. Lying on the ground covered with animal skins, and among them, a wizard was jumping around, chanting words that Bai Qiran could not understand. After watching the old for a long time, Bai Qiran couldn't help asking. Is his mouth never dry? Master, the wizard relies on this to eat. Li smiled bitterly. He must have been used to it long ago. After watching for a while, Bai Qiran suddenly saw the change. At the edge of the settlement, a miasma suddenly gathered and turned into a cloud full of poisonous mist. Before long, Jiang Lan walked out of the clouds with a cold face, and walked towards the sick people in the crowd. Seeing her coming, the crowd stepped aside in horror, while the wizard danced weird dance steps to go to Jiang Lan, screaming, and waving the long stick made of bone in his hand behind her, like driving something away. Mentally retarded. Bai Qiran couldn't help saying. Of course, Jiang Lan didn't pay attention to the mental the wizard. She came to a few sick patients on her own, and then stretched out her hand to them. Several centipede-like poisonous insects came out of her sleeves, bit the arms of the patients and began to suck blood. This is sucking the plague. Li explained in a low voice. The goddess of plague is about to take away her dependence. Several poisonous insects were desperately sucking blood, looking terrible, but on the contrary, as the poisonous insects sucked, the ailing people's complexion improved a lot. Hey, wise immortal. Bai Qiran took a closer look and said while he was not paying attention. If I read it right. Well, you did. I'm afraid that is the rudimentary form of Gu technique. Wise immortal replied in a low voice. The girl is using poisonous insects to treat other people's illnesses. Feudal superstition kills people. Bai Qiran said leisurely. After sucking blood for a while, Jiang Lan took back the poisonous insect from his hand, and the complexions of several patients looked much better. The human races in the crowd showed joy, but no one expressed gratitude to Jiang Lan. She didn't say anything, turned around and walked in the direction where she had come. The crazy wizard followed behind her again, chanting a spell while waving a bone stick. This is too mentally retarded. Seeing the wizard's actions, Bai Qiran felt very melancholy. I can't bear it. It is estimated that Jiang Lan also felt that the wizard was mentally retarded, so when she walked back, she quickly sped up her pace, escaped into the mist of miasma and disappeared. That's it. Li said. The goddess of plague has been driven away, and everyone's illness has been cured. Bai Qiran thought for a while and decided to tell Li about the problem, so he asked. Li, I ask you, do you really think that someone is sick? Does it have anything to do with that goddess of plague? I do not know. Li answered honestly. Each god performs their own duties. It stands to reason that the goddess of plague is indeed the evil god who is in charge of the plague and makes people sick, but I think that if the goddess of plague is really a terrible god like the rumors, it is unreasonable for our wizard to still live so healthy. After all, when he presided over the ceremony, even I wanted to beat him a little bit. You have a root of wisdom, kid. Bai Qiran opened his mouth, and once again felt the sense of rejection from heaven, so he said, Next time I have a chance, I will tell you about medicine and Gu techniques. Come here today. You go home early and I will go home to rest. Ah, Master Yu. Before he finished speaking, a gust of wind suddenly blew on the ground, making him unable to open his eyes. When the wind stopped and he opened his eyes again, there was no sign of Bai Qiran in the surroundings, except a deep straw shoe print on the ground. Where have you been? As soon as he returned to the hut, Bai Qiran heard Jiang Lan ask coldly, Go out and wander around. Bai Qiran replied, Didn't I tie the prey there? Don't be arrogant just because you are a god. The outside world is not safe even if you are a god. You are not the Eastern Emperor Tai. There will always be someone in this world who can beat you. Jiang Lan said coldly, Come here and help me deal with these ramshorn beasts. Oh. Bai Qiran responded and followed Jiang Lan. The little girl took these few things called ramshorn beasts to the river, lifted some of the river water with divine power to wash them, and then took a long knife and swiftly cut its neck with a swipe. The blood ran out and the ramshorn beast quickly lost strength. Then Jiang Lan raised the knife again and began to peel and cut the meat. Her hands were very swift, but the knife in her hand looked very blunt, which made her movements look a bit difficult. Bai Qiran looked at the side for a while and then said, Let me do it. He asked Jiang Lan to step aside, but instead of taking the knife, he released a sword beam from his palm and easily smashed the whole beast into several regular portions. What? Seeing his sword beam, Jiang Lan asked slightly with interest. Is this your supernatural power? No, this is called a sword beam. Bai Qiran swiftly caught the second ramshorn beast and replied, After cultivation, everyone can master it. Do I have to kill this one too? Kill them all. I will use them to make jerky. Jiang Lan answered, then asked, This kind of power is something that everyone can learn. Yes, if you are interested, I can also teach you. Bai Qiran replied. Besides, I have done research on the poisons you manipulated, so we can talk about it and make progress together if it's okay. Bai Qiran handled the pile of things very quickly, and then threw the water into the wild under Jiang Lan's guidance, carried the essence and some useful bones and returned to the hut. People in this era only ate 2 meals a day. After eating a meal equivalent to dinner, Bai Qiran assists Jiang Lan in processing the remaining flesh and bones, and then Jiang Lan hesitated to ask. You told me that you can teach me a trick before. She seemed to want to learn, but she was a little bit ashamed to speak out. Bai Qiran couldn't help but smile. If you want to learn, I will teach you. He was not afraid that Jiang Lan would use this technique to do evil. First, from what he had just observed in the human race, Jiang Lan was not a vicious deity, and lastly, it was not like learning the sword beam could make you invincible. The sword beam could increase the attack ability of the human race at the same level a little, and not every human race is the same as Bai Qiran. In fact, the sword beam was essentially an application of energy. In theory, any creature could learn it. As a god, Jiang Lan had a very strong understanding, and she was born with strong divine power in her body, so it didn't take long. Before it got dark, under the guidance of Bai Qiran, she successfully cultivated her first sword beam. Seeing the sword light lingering at the fingertips, the little girl's face showed a hint of joy, but the joy quickly dissipated again and returned to her cold look. Thank you for teaching me this. Jiang Lan said. In return, I will give you this thing. She walked into the hut, searched for it for a long time, then walked out with a black and sake whip and stuffed it into Bai Qiran's hand. This is a relic left by my grandfather. He was also a god. Jiang Lan explained. Holding it, you can be immune to most of the toxins in this world. My grandpa had this thing in the first place before he obtained the godhood related to medicine. The godhood of medicine, thank you. Bai Qiran wanted to say that in fact, toxins shouldn't cause much damage to him, but this is after all people's intentions. He took the whip and asked. But why, since medicine has been invented in this world, the human race in that settlement still has to use the dance ritual to cure the disease? After hearing the words, Jiang Lan gave a slight pause and asked. Did you see it? Although her tone did not change, Bai Qiran could hear her being a little bit embarrassed. Indeed, if he was in her shoes, coming and going when a mentally retarded sang and danced behind him, he would also feel ashamed to speak out. Bai Qiran nodded. Jiang Lan thought for a while and then said. There is no medicine. Of course, It is because the godhood of medicine has been wiped out by the Emperor of Heaven. There is nothing to say. Speaking of this topic, Jiang Lan seemed a little unwilling to continue. After closing the topic hastily, the little girl drove Bai Qiran out and went into the house to rest by herself. Days passed quickly. After Bai Qiran had collected food for Jiang Lan in the daytime, he would go to the nearby human settlement to see if he was still alive. At night he made wise immortal teach him the spells about space. At any rate he finally had the true chi, so he wanted to try difficult things. Moreover, according to wise immortal, space spells were the prerequisite skills of time spells. To decipher the time runes in the God rune model, Bai Qiran must first become proficient in space spells. After a few days, relying on his own talents, it could be regarded as a fruitful harvest. At least Bai Qiran currently had no problem opening up a simple small space on the object. A few days later, outside Jiang Lan's yard, two uninvited guests suddenly arrived. The people who came were two gods, but they did not come in. Instead, they wandered outside the miasma ring near Jiang Lan's house. It seemed that they also knew the power of the poisonous fog made by the righteous god of plague and poison. When they came, Jiang Lan had already gone to work. Sensing their breath, Bai Qiran walked out of the miasma range, and saw two blue-faced gods standing in the woods with a height of tens of meters. "Excuse me, is the high god Bai Qiran here?" Seeing Bai Qiran coming out, the two gods bowed very politely. "I am Bai Qiran, yes." Bai Qiran nodded. The two gods looked at each other, and then one of the gods took out a huge golden scroll from his waist and drew it apart and read. "The high god Bai Qiran, listen to his majesty's order." Bai Qiran lowered his head slightly. Maybe it was thinking that Bai Qiran was a newborn god, and didn't understand all the rules, so the two gods didn't say anything, they just started to read. The new god Bai Qiran is infinitely powerful and brave. He is specially appointed as the mighty marshal of the Eastern army. From now he is in charge of the Eastern land, guarding the tranquility of the mortal realm. Bai Qiran took the order. Bai Qiran raised his hands high and took over the huge golden scrolls that the two gods had put down. It was estimated that it was also a deliberate temptation. The golden scrolls handed over by the two gods did not shrink but kept their original size and weight. When they were placed in Bai Qiran's hand, the surrounding tree trunks shook lightly. But when they saw Bai Qiran taking over the scroll as usual, and letting it shrink and hold it around his waist, they really showed a respectful look. "The high god, please come with us." One of the gods looked at the house surrounded by miasma and whispered, "It's not auspicious here. After going back, His Majesty has prepared a place for you." Bai Qiran just wanted to ask Jiang Lan what was going on, when suddenly she saw the little girl appearing on the road ahead. The two tall gods also saw her, but at this time, the two giants seemed to have encountered something terrible and avoided it very badly. One of the gods whispered to Bai Qiran, "The high god, please excuse us for a while. We will come to you again later." "Well, go go go." Bai Qiran nodded. The two gods flew into the sky as if they had fled from something dangerous. Jiang Lan also saw this when she came over and asked, "Are you leaving?" "Yeah." "What godhood has the Emperor of Heaven bestowed upon you?" "Something like, Mighty Marshal of Eastern Army?" Bai Qiran replied, "It seems that he let me manage the Eastern land. It's quite good. You are equivalent to one of the 5 great emperors on the earth, and the Eastern land was the richest of them all. Although your position is still lower than the 5 great emperors, but it is enough to see that the emperor places high hopes on you." Jiang Lan nodded and said lightly, "Go ahead. Goodbye." "Okay." Bai Qiran also gave her a hand. "In the past few days, I would like to thank Miss Jiang for taking care of me. I don't say thank you very much. If you need any help in the future, you can come to me. Bai Qiran will definitely help you." Jiang Lan didn't reply, silently walked past Bai Qiran, then waved her hand with her back to him as the response. After parting ways with Jiang Lan, he had been going around outside. Not long after, the two gods came up. Perhaps it was because Lu Wu had informed them in advance, they consciously took Bai Qiran into the clouds and flew to the destination. During the flight, Bai Qiran asked, "Can I ask you a little question?" "The high god, please do not hesitate to ask." The two gods bowed their heads and said, "We will tell everything we know." Bai Qiran smiled, knowing that their everything was definitely a polite remark. But to him who knew nothing, any information was a gain, so he asked, "Speaking of which, about the human race." "Human race?" "Ah, Does High God care because they look similar to you? One of the gods laughed and said, They are indeed the best-looking race on this land. Speaking of which, apart from His Majesty the Emperor, you are the second deity we have seen that looks like a human. But you have to remember that we and they are two different races. You are born noble. For them, you can treat them as subjects, livestock, or even objects, but you must not sympathize with them and stand with them. You are a god, they are humans. Gods and humans are different. The problem was that I am actually a human being. Chiron slandered a few words and then asked, So, how many human settlements are there on this land like the one next to me? It's not a lot. The human race is not a strong race in the first place. Thanks to us seeing that they are beautifully born and taking care of them, they barely survive. They surrendered to our feet in order to save their lives. One of the blue-faced gods replied, At present, there are about a dozen settlements in the human race, most of which are distributed in the vicinity. In other places the human race cannot survive. I understand. Chiron nodded and then asked, So, what about girl Jianglan? She has been taking care of me these days. I don't think she is a god with a bad personality. Why do you reject her so much? The two gods looked at each other, and then the other god lowered his voice and said, Because she is the goddess of plague, which is an unlucky charm. Chiron raised his eyebrows. Aren't you saying that you know everything? Why do you perfuse me? Do you think I'm stupid? No, this little god dare not, dare not. The two gods hurriedly waved their hands. Then tell me the truth. Chiron nodded and said, Don't worry, my mouth is tightly shut and I won't go around talking nonsense. The remnants of the previous dynasty. Chiron asked in confusion. Yup. The two gods looked up and down, left and right as if they were afraid of ears on the wall. After struggling for a long time, they seemed to have given up again, whispering to each other quietly, and then said to Chiron, The High God, please don't go out and talk what I told you today. Under His Majesty the Emperor, there are two gods named Tian Ting, Heavenly Ear, and Di Shi, Earthly Eye, who can watch the world from time to time. I understand. Chiron nodded. So one of the two gods began to explain in a low voice. His Majesty the Emperor is not born to be the Emperor of gods. Before him there were other heavenly emperors. Starting from the first one, Chaos Great Emperor, we can't remember how many heavenly emperors have been in power until now. The grandfather of the goddess of plague is one of them. So that's the case. She was not liquidated, it is also the kindness of the emperor. Chiron nodded. On the one hand, of course, His Majesty the Emperor is kind. The god arched his hands to the sky and said, But on the other hand there is another reason. The goddess of plague inherited her mother's godhood, ruling over Zhangxi. If she chooses to resist, I am afraid that the Zhangxi will be upset, so His Majesty spared her life. But if we say that the most wise and martial emperor of the past dynasties, it is naturally the emperor of this generation, the Eastern Emperor Tai. Another god also made up a flattery in time. He is not only the strongest among the heavenly emperors, but also the most perfect one. You can say that His Majesty is the incarnation of the heaven that created this world. What do you mean? Chiron said curiously. You will gradually understand. The two gods laughed but did not answer. After a flight, the two gods took Chiron to a high mountain peak. On this mountain peak, a palace has been built. The aura was lush, the forest was beautiful, there were several waterfalls and rainbows in the mountains, and the white birds were flying and playing in the lakes on the mountainside. Compared with the settlements of human races, this place was simply a paradise. This is the shrine on the ground that His Majesty the Emperor God bestowed on you. The two gods introduced. Everything here is your property and we are also your subordinates. If the High God has any instructions, just mention it. Chiron nodded. If there is no order, then we both return first. The two gods said they left here and returned to the sky. This palace was only built for Chiron. Unless they were invited by him, they were not qualified to stay here. When they left a coat of arms to Chiron, saying that with this thing he could order the heavenly god army that belonged to the eastern land, and could also order the two brothers. After sending away the two gods, Chiron walked into the palace. There were some maids in the palace. In order to take care of Chiron's aesthetics, they had some human appearance features more or less, but they were aliens after all. There are other places on their body that are quite different from the human race. Rejecting the requests of several maids to serve him in the bath and bed, Baichuran took a bath by himself and finally, put on a slightly decent dress. Then he returned to his bedroom and first checked the palace with his soul awareness, nullifying the monitoring measures. After thinking about what the two gods said, he let out his true qi and made a barrier to block Tianting and Dishur, and then he took Wise Immortal from his back and placed it in front of him. What do you think of this heavenly emperor? Baichuran asked. I guess. According to those two gods, I'm afraid Eastern Emperor Tai has made some shameful deal with heaven. Wise Immortal replied. But you have to see everything to know, and now it's just speculation. What? What do you want to do? I wonder if I can help the human race of this era avoid some detours. Baichuran said. Although the immortal ancestor will appear and create cultivation methods that belong to humans, but other skills such as spells and techniques can't be achieved overnight. If I can find a way to leave some of them in this era, will it reduce the sacrifice of the human race? Then what are you going to do? Wise Immortal asked back. You have also seen that heaven does not allow you to directly teach these things to the human race. I'll teach it indirectly. Baichuran replied. You have also seen Li's talent. I have intentionally or unintentionally raised a point, he can always realize something. Then what about your quest to look for the first heaven jealousy? Wise Immortal asked. That's not in a hurry. The Emperor sent me here, he will definitely give me a test. Baichuran replied. As long as I complete the work well, the Heavenly Court's intelligence network will allow me to come in and out. Let's not talk about this. At present, I can learn more and my actions will be more secure. Hurry up and teach me the next space spells. After staying in this shrine temporarily for a month, Baichuran, who was indulging in space spell learning, finally received the first task given him by the Emperor. As he expected, as soon as he came up, the Emperor of Heaven asked him to lead troops to suppress the rebellion in several capitals in the eastern land. This month, Baichuran also learned about the basic topography and some basic common sense of the world through his studies. The first was geography. The center of the world was this land, which was larger than the total area of 9 provinces and 10 lands combined with the wilderness. The Heavenly Court divided the land into 4 parts: south, east, north, and west according to 2 geographical features. With the Milky Way across the sky as the boundary, the earth was divided into east and west. With the farthest ice mountain in the north and the farthest valley in the south as the boundary, the world was divided into north and south. And outside the earth, it is surrounded by the sea. In the eastern sea there was the sacred tree Fusang, the current residence of the 3-legged brothers of the sun god, and in the periphery of the sea, it is unfathomable, even the gods don't know. In addition to the sacred tree Fusang, there are many other special places on the earth that are not under the jurisdiction of the patron saints of the quartet, such as Buzhou Mountain, Tongtian Jinmu, Tiandi Garden, Kunlun Shedu, etc., but Buzhou Mountain has been a long time ago. The god of sin was destroyed, there was only a ruin left, and the god of sin was killed. The god of sin used to control the flood, and the god of the heavens currently in charge of the water veins is Shuebo, which also proved one thing to Baichuran. The gods can be killed, and after the gods die, the rules he represents would not be destroyed. So even if before death the gods used his own godhood to disrupt the rules, then after the death of this god, other gods could also use their power to suppress the turmoil. Others, there are the heavenly gods who are in charge of the movement of the stars, and the heavenly gods who are in charge of the sky in all directions, but these gods were so complicated that Baichuran hasn't had time to write them down. What he managed was the land of the east. This land was filled with kingdoms and tribes established by various races, and most of the settlements of human races are concentrated on the land of the east. In nominal terms, these races are all surrendered to the feet of the emperor, but because the gods really don't treat them as people, from time to time, these countries and tribes would have no one born as ruler kind of thoughts. Some of them are strange beasts with supernatural powers, and they are not inferior to ordinary gods in fighting. The other races of this era are quite strong, not as weak as the human race. This time it was the 2 brothers who came to send the order this time. After receiving the decree from the emperor, Baichuran asked, "Which countries are the rebellion?" The 2 gods replied respectfully. It's the Giant Kingdom, Rainbow Kingdom, and Shi-Bai-Shur Kingdom, but this time, it seems that a god is leading them. Heavenly Court's positions were limited, thus there were many gods staying on the ground to supervise a certain place for the Heavenly Court. Therefore, rebels led by a god on earth were uncommon, but they were not rare. Jianglan was not the only one who loved the human race. Other gods occasionally had feelings for races similar to them. Which god was rebelling this time? Bai Qiran asked. It's Shi Bai Shi, the god of Shi Bai Shi Kingdom. One of the gods replied. His Majesty sent him to supervise the Shi Bai Shi Kingdom, but he later thought that he was a member of the Shi Bai Shi Kingdom. How strong is Shi Bai Shi? Not as good as the ninth ministerial god of heaven. Understood. Bai Qiran nodded. Then let's go. There was not much nonsense, and Bai Qiran took the people directly, letting them surround the several countries that had caused the rebellion this time. Although the area of the country in this era was vast, most of it was wilderness as long as it surrounded human settlements, and it did not require much manpower. After the siege was completed, Bai Qiran gave orders to his soldiers. Let's stay around like this for now and wait for my order before acting. Yes, sir. The gods bowed their heads to answer, but then someone raised objections. This little god doesn't understand. Why don't we just attack? The people of the Giant Kingdom, Rainbow Kingdom, and Shi Bai Shi Kingdom are nothing more than insects to us. Although it is a worm, you will still be bitten if you are not careful. Can you guarantee that after the fight, there will be no casualties? What's more, there is a strong god on the opposite side. Bai Qiran put on a distressed look of, I'm doing all this for your own good, and replied. Once a war begins, a lot of soldiers will surely be killed, but if I can persuade Shi Bai Shi to once again surrender to the emperor, isn't that better? Even if he is stubborn, I can change the plan to kill the head of the enemy first, and leave the three kingdoms to serve the emperor again. Wouldn't it be beautiful? The gods thought about it and felt that what Bai Qiran said was very reasonable, but there seemed to be something wrong. However, as Bai Qiran was the leader with such a sincere speech, they were too embarrassed to disobey Bai Qiran, so they said one after another. Marshal is kind. Just do what you want. The three countries used a mountain in the Shi Bai Shi Kingdom as a stronghold, and most of the tribesmen and fighters gathered here. After Bai Qiran ordered his subordinates to keep the siege, he entered the deep mountains of the Shi Bai Shi Kingdom alone and came to the stronghold. Seeing Bai Qiran coming by himself, the soldiers at the base panicked. Although Bai Qiran's height seemed much shorter than theirs, these people understood that the strength of the gods could not be judged simply by their size. 1,000 feet tall god might be a giant that was scaled up. A god with short stature might be able to manipulate natural celestial phenomena and possess terrifying powers. Let your leader come out and see me. Standing under the stronghold, Bai Qiran pretended to be arrogant and shouted. Upon seeing this, several fighters of the Shi Bai Shi clan and Rainbow clan who were stationed at the stronghold turned around and walked back to the stronghold. They should have gone to report. After a while, the huge wooden door of the stronghold was released from the ground, and Shi Bai Shi slowly walked out of the stronghold door. In addition to being a bit taller, the god Shi Bai Shi's appearance was the same as other people from the Shi Bai Shi kingdom. His upper body was humanoid, but he had a pair of white dog ears, and his lower body was a six-legged one, with 4 horse legs and 2 dog paws. With 2 blue snakes wrapped around his ears and a spear made of fine iron in his hand, he came to Bai Qiran's body and looked down at him. You are Shi Bai Shi? Bai Qiran looked up at him and asked. I am. Shi Bai Shi bowed his head and said. Stranger, are you the commander-in-chief sent by the emperor to attack us this time? Well, I'm new here. Bai Qiran introduced herself. The emperor of heaven asked me to be in charge of the earth in the east. Are you one of the 4 gods? Hearing the name Bai Qiran reported, a relieved expression appeared on Shi Bai Shi's face. It seems that the emperor is really going to kill us all. It's just that we have rejected the offerings of several higher-level gods, and our kingdoms are about to be destroyed. The gods are living beings, but these creatures of the lower realm are not? He waved his iron spear, looked at Bai Qiran and shouted. I think I'm not your opponent, but you don't think that you can get a good deal from me. Since the emperor does not intend to let us go, then our whole clan will fight to the last one. Bai Qiran looked into the depths of the stronghold, and the soldiers from the 3 kingdoms also looked at him indignantly. He thought for a moment and said with a deliberate sneer. Shi Bai Shi, you have to think carefully. Once the war starts, under the supervision of the 2 gods, your people will definitely be driven out and killed. On the contrary, if you surrender, I can still admonish the Emperor of Heaven to spare the rest of your tribes. What a joke, surrender will give me a way out. Do you really think I'm stupid? I have seen how Gong Yu clan, the former emperor's wings, were slowly cut off. Shi Bai Shi sneered and said. Instead of letting my people be the cattle of the Emperor of Heaven, it is better to let them stand and die with me. What's more, just relying on the earth to watch the sky and listen to those two wastes, and how many of my people can be caught? Don't say anything else, even if it's my stronghold and they can't see or hear it either. That means Tian Ting and Di Shi's ability was not as omnipotent as I imagined. Bai Qiran asked. Although they are known as the eyes and ears of the Emperor, they are not born in the Emperor's body after all. Do you think that with Eastern Tai's character he will allow them to see everything and hear everything? He sneered. Bai Qiran thought for a while. To be on the safe side, he released the true qi in his body and enveloped the entire stronghold fortress, and then he said, I don't quite understand Eastern Emperor Tai's character. I haven't even seen him face to face. But after knowing that you want to deal with him, I have an idea. Okay. Bai Shi looked at Bai Qiran, then sneered. Oh, so you can't understand the actions of the Emperor of Heaven? It's ironic for one of the high gods of the heavens. Of course I can't. Others say that I am a god, but I think I am a human being. Bai Qiran nodded and said. So I want to help you. He obviously couldn't believe Bai Qiran so easily. He took a step back and said on alert. Tell me your thoughts first. Of course. Bai Qiran looked at him and said slowly. Bai Shi, in order to save your people, I need your head. Bai Shi was stunned when he heard the words and then burst into laughter. He pointed to Bai Qiran and said with a smile. It turns out that you want to trick me to commit suicide. Are you really think I'm that stupid? After I die, won't my people and allies be at your disposal? It seems that you think that I can't beat you. Bai Qiran opened his hands and put on a posture, saying. So, brother, wanna have a sparring? Bai Shi looked down at Bai Qiran and then sneered. Come, I'm afraid you won't make it. He shouted and his body was shocked. On the blade of the fine iron spear in his hand appeared hurricane and thunder. At the same time, the clouds in the sky also gathered above his head with his actions. This god was in the middle of his gestures. All go with wind and thunder. The blue veins of Bai Shi's arm bulged, his 6 legs pressed hard, and with a loud shout, he thrust toward Bai Qiran with a strength that could destroy the mountains and split the sea. Bai Qiran looked at him. As a god, his strength was very strong, and the magical power he holds has made his weapon attack ability to a higher level, but in terms of skills, his attack method is very rough. It can be said that it is the style used by ordinary hunters for hunting. With this kind of power, he might still be able to rely on the suppression of power to defeat ordinary cultivators, but when facing Bai Qiran, it was obviously far from enough. Bai Qiran took a step forward, and before the spear touched him, he grabbed the spear directly. The force on the spear was transferred to the ground by his unstretched method, opening a fissure hundreds of miles deep. Then with a strong tug he pulled the Bai Shi over, grabbed his spear from the god's hand, split it into 2 at once and kicked the Bai Shi out. There was a loud bang, and the surrounding god saw billowing smoke and dust extending from the rebel stronghold to another mountain. Bai Qiran raised his hand, grabbing Bai Shi from the end of the gully, and threw the god on the ground in front of him, then pointed to his face and asked. Do you still think that I need to trick you to commit suicide? Bai Shi's expression changed and then he muffled. No need, you are very strong. Then can we talk about things now? Bai Qiran lifted him from the ground and asked. Take me in, let's talk about it slowly. Bai Shi stood up and patted the dust on his body, then let the clansmen and allies behind him step back, and led Bai Qiran into the stronghold. In the conflict just now, Bai Shi, who was kicked out by Bai Qiran, hit a corner of the stronghold. Fortunately, there was no one there, so there were no casualties in the stronghold. Bai Qiran walked into the stronghold with Bai Shi, and also saw the people of the other 2 countries. As the name suggests, the giant kingdom was a tribe of tall giants, except that they are at least 5 or 6 meters tall, and their hands and feet were extraordinarily thick. There is no big difference in appearance between them and the human race. The people of Rainbow Kingdom were more peculiar. They all had 2 heads. When walking, the 2 heads were still talking to each other. Seeing Bai Qiran coming in with Bai Shi, they all acted very scared. A 9-meter-tall giant shrank beside Bai Qiran, as if the next moment Bai Qiran would open his mouth and eat him. Following Bai Shi, Bai Qiran came all the way to the center of the stronghold. In the tall wooden house in the center, there were a few huge seats built of wood and some kind of animal bones. Bai Shi sat on the central one. Bai Qiran was asked to sit on a smaller chair next to him, and then Bai Shi asked, You said you want to save my people and allies. Why do you need my head? Because I want to gain the trust of the Emperor of Heaven. Bai Qiran replied. In this rebellion, the warriors of the three kingdoms are not the opponents of the Eastern God army at all. Why does the Emperor need me, a God general, to take action? Because he want to test my abilities. You are the leader of the rebellion. As long as you are killed, the Emperor will not care about the other tribes at all. You may not like my words, but in his eyes, I'm afraid your men are no different from the ants in the heavenly garden. As long as you offer your head, whether I want to take your tribe to a safe place now or save more tribes in the future, it will be more convenient. Speaking is always easier than doing. Shi Baishur asked. How are you going to take away my people and allies, and where are you going to take them? It's simple. I recently learned a new trick from a friend. As Bai Qiran said, he took out a wolf hair brush and a blank scroll from his storage bag. He pulled the scroll aside and lay down on the ground. The brush was soaked in the ink he was carrying in his storage bag, and then he started to draw on the scroll. As the hidden leader of the Righteous Alliance, Bai Qiran has also studied the techniques of other sections. Of course, he has also studied the painting techniques of Saint of Painting Li Pengfei. The Saint of Painting, as well as the shameful elder of the Qingming sword sect who liked to collude with him to sell porn books, have also accepted his instruction, so drawing a picture was not difficult for him. Soon, Bai Qiran drew a freehand landscape painting on the snow-white scroll, inspired by the mountain range where he lived during this period. He put away his pen and ink, dried the ink on the painting and then said to Shi Baishur, I rely on this painting to take all your people out. This painting is good, but don't you think that relying on bribery can let the Emperor let go of our three kingdoms? Come here. Bai Qiran waved to Shi Baishur, who leaned in suspiciously. Suddenly Bai Qiran jumped up and choked his neck, slamming his head into the painting. Shi Baishur struggled twice, but Bai Qiran quickly let go of him. He jumped up and said angrily at Bai Qiran, If you want to kill me, just do it. But I won't bear your insult. Look around before speak. Bai Qiran said to Shi Baishur. He looked around and found that he had come to a mountain range that he had never seen before. Where did you get me? Welcome to the world in the painting. Bai Qiran stretched out his arms and said to him, Although I am not very proficient in this matter, this space is barely enough for your people to survive for a while. Why did you choose to help us? Shi Baishur looked at the unstable and changing ink marks on the edge of this space and asked, You are not of my race and you are favored by the Emperor of Heaven. You can become the real superior of the heavenly court, enjoying an extravagant life beyond our imagination, and enjoying prosperity and wealth forever. Because the gods are also not my race. Bai Qiran smiled and replied, And my race is too weak for the gods, so we need allies just like you form an alliance with the Giant Kingdom and the Rainbow Kingdom. Shi Baishur said nothing. Think about my previous offer. Bai Qiran turned her back and said, I'll give you 2 days to think. After that, if you don't give your head, then I can only obey the order. You also said that it is not my race, then for my race, kill 3 other races is nothing to me. Are you threatening me? Shi Baishur smiled bitterly. Bai Qiran thought for a while and replied, Yes, you can understand like that. A group of divine troops responsible for guarding the eastern land has surrounded the stronghold fortress of Shi Baishur Kingdom for half a day. Bai Qiran entered the rebel stronghold since the siege was completed in the morning. After a while, there was a suspected conflict explosion near the stronghold. No one knew what happened inside. They only knew that there was only one explosion. After the smoke dissipated, the silence was restored. It wasn't until the sun set into the horizon and the moon goddess appeared above the sky with her carriage that the army saw their commander Bai Qiran slowly walking out of it. He didn't seem to have been hurt, and the silver armor on his body was more decorative than practical. Not even a trace of dust was contaminated. Seeing him come out, a group of gods hurriedly greeted him and asked, Marshal, what happened to the rebels? The leader of the rebel army, Shi Baishur, is stubborn and has been rectified by me. Bai Qiran replied with his hands behind his back. As for the remaining ethnic groups in the Giant Kingdom, Rainbow Kingdom, and Shi Baishur Kingdom, it looked like they were not afraid of death, so I sent them to see their leader. This. A group of gods seemed a little hesitant, and finally, a god general gritted his teeth and said, It's not like we don't believe you, but there is no proof. Bai Qiran moved his hand behind his back to the front of him, and the gods would see that he was holding a white bag in his hand. The lower part was wrapped in blood. Baichuran opened the white coarse cloth. Inside it, there was a head with canine ears. Green snakes are wrapped around the ears. Everyone recognized this big and flushed head was the head of the god Shi Baishur. Did you see my credentials? Baichuran looked at the deity coldly and asked. The god general was sweating like rain and quickly replied. Marshal is brave and invincible. This little god is abrupt. Let's retreat, there is nothing to look at inside. Baichuran ordered. The stronghold has been uprooted by me, and all the insurgents have been dealt with by me. Take this head up to the sky and offer it to His Majesty. I am a little tired, so I will go back and rest first. Yes, sir. Several gods took the head of Shi Baishur that Baichuran threw over, and said respectfully to him. Leaving aside these nominal subordinates, Baichuran galloped all the way and returned to his own shrine. Once again he screened away a few maids who wanted to wait for him to take a bath. Baichuran returned to his room alone, releasing the barrier, and then took out a painting from the storage bag. The painting was full of mountains and running water, but in the mountains, there is a wooden stronghold hidden in the mountains, and the crowds can still be seen faintly inside. I put them here, but where should I release them? Looking at the picture scroll, Baichuran said in thought. It turns out you have no idea. Wise immortal spit out. You have an all according to the plan look, so I thought you were prepared. I originally wanted to put them underground and create a space underground for them to live in temporarily, but after thinking about it, I felt something was wrong. Baichuran replied. Although the Mother Earth has long been dead, there may be a god has inherited her godhood, and can monitor the underground. Or else, if you let them live in this picture temporarily, the energy and space inside can last for a few months. After a few months, with your talent, I might be able to teach you how to open up multi-layer space. Wise Immortal suggested. Multi-layer space? Is it like your cave mansion? One trial is surrounded by another trial, and several spaces exist in one big space? Baichuran asked. Yes, to be honest, it's very difficult. Even in the age of land immortals, the only ones who can use this technique, except for a few already dead geniuses, is me, but I believe in your talent. Wise Immortal smiled and said. So it should not be too late, I will continue to teach you today, listen carefully. In this way Baichuran studied for several days and his space spells also progressed rapidly, progressing at an unimaginable speed even for Wise Immortal. However, a few days later, the results of Baichuran's conquest came down. After seeing the head of the rebel leader, the Heavenly Emperor was happy and then sent someone to give Baichuran a large number of rewards. Those gold and silver coins for Baichuran were useless. He gave all of them to his subordinates who participated in the last counter-rebellion. In the long run, even if Baichuran occasionally violated the rules, he believed these subordinates would not go around to spread rumors. But in addition to these things, the Emperor of Heaven also sent a group of people. These are the most beautiful beauties selected in the various settlements of the human race in recent years. The blue-faced god who was in charge of delivering the decree pointed to the group of women kneeling outside the main hall and said, His Majesty said that you are not married yet, so he wants to find a goddess who is the right person for you. But you are in your prime of life and it is inevitable to be lonely. These beauties are given to you whether you are married as a concubine or a plaything, it's okay. Baichuran glanced at the women outside the temple. Most of the gods were strange in appearance, not human-like, but because the head of the gods, Tai, was completely human, the gods also took the appearance of humans as beautiful. They protected the human race on the one hand, to show that as the god of heaven, they ruled all things in the world. On the other hand, human was raised as livestock in captivity, and when beautiful women and handsome men appear inside, they can be used for fun. Now these women kneeling outside the temple are estimated to be the beauties selected from 100 or even 1,000 in each settlement. Some of them may even be ready for marriage, but without exception, as long as they are selected, the gods would forcefully take them away. In the heavenly palace, they would be carved by special gods to make them more beautiful, and then they would be included in the inventory of beauties in the heavens as objects, and become rewards for the gods to distribute to other gods. I have no interest in them. Baichuran raised his eyebrows. When the blue-faced god heard this, he immediately bowed his head and said, The subordinates are willing to help the gods to share their worries and solve problems. Baichuran looked at him and then at the female human race outside. Even though the blue-faced god was shrunk to the minimum, his height was more than 3 meters. Compared with the petite human women outside, the contrast was even greater. If he gave these women to him, most of them would be played to death in a few days. Forget it, I will accept these women, I will use when I have time. Chiron coughed. Send my thank to His Majesty for my reward. Sure. The blue-faced god showed disappointment, then retired and walked out of the hall. He came to the bottom of the mountain, where another blue-faced god was waiting for him, and when he saw him, he asked quickly. How? He didn't ask for the money but received the beauty. It seems that he is just cautious rather than having other plans. The deity curled his lips and replied. He is just pretending to be upright. I bet that secretly he still can't help but take those women. Then go back and report to His Majesty, so that he doesn't have to worry. Another god smiled and said. Money doesn't work, but he is moved by beauty. It seems that the mighty marshal of Eastern Army is nothing more than that. In his divine shrine, Chiron used his soul awareness to hear the conversation between the two blue-faced gods. After seeing the two gods flying into the sky, he withdrew his soul awareness and said to the women kneeling on the ground, Let's get up now. Chiron called the maids of other races in the shrine and ordered them to settle the women. Staying in the shrine at the moment, at least they are safe and there was no need to worry about the wild beasts. As for where they should go from now on, they could think about it later. After they settled down, Chiron returned to the room and began to learn from wise immortal. However, considering what the two gods were talking about, Chiron still had to act. After several days of observation, he called the most qualified of the beauties to his bedroom on the third night, and only let her go until the next morning. Of course, Chiron didn't do anything to them. If he really had the guts, he wouldn't have maintained his virginity until now. He just asked this human female to cooperate with him in an experiment. He tried to directly teach this human female the cultivation method from the chi refining stage to the foundation establishment stage through word of mouth. As a result, in the process of teaching, heaven did not interfere with him. I think this is probably because of the degree of influence on history. Wise immortal said. These women, if in the original history, it is estimated that they would have spent their lives as pets of the gods, or even more unlucky, they encountered a god with terrible fetish and were directly played to death. Even if you taught them how to build the foundation, if they stay here without going out, nor can they have a big impact on the human race outside. Then what if I let them teach the cultivation method on my behalf? Chiron asked. If you don't want to kill them, you'd better not do it. Wise immortal replied. Heaven doesn't kill you but rejects you. That's because it can't harm you. But a few ordinary humans are nothing. I guess if they go out to talk nonsense, they will be crushed by heaven as soon as they speak. After a pause, it said again. Actually, when you manipulated natural phenomena to guide your named disciple to comprehend the Tao, he comprehended the foundation building method under your inspiration, but he was not punished by heaven. I am afraid, your disciple in the original history, is not a nameless one. Speaking of this, Chiron remembered that he still had a disciple in that human settlement. Thinking of his talent made Chiron release killing intent. That young man might have accomplished a lot in the foundation establishment stage in the past few months. It doesn't matter, no matter who he is, as long as the human race can avoid detours, that's good. Chiron pondered for a moment and said. After waiting for 2 days, I will also go see how he is doing. It should almost be able to guide him to understand some magic tricks. By the way, I also need to go to thank Jianglan. After 3 days, after Chiron completed the progress of the space spell, he left the shrine and walked in the direction of Jianglan's house. In his shrine, there was a map drawn by Heavenly Court. Thanks to that map, he successfully figured out the north, south, east and west of the world and where he was. When the two gods flew to the shrine with clouds and fog that day, there was no cover on the way, and they were high in the sky, so Chiron could easily remember the way. Halfway through, he remembered that he hadn't brought Jianglan a gift. He thought that the young lady didn't like vulgar things like wealth, so he simply wandered in the nearby wilderness twice and killed a big white fox with horns on its back, peeled off its skin, cleaned it, and then bandaged it into a gift. Apart from speaking with strength, it seems that there is really no way to make a person who is not familiar with him believe him in this situation. So he also put on a posture like Wang Feiheng to Jianglan, then said, "Girl, wanna have a spar?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.